Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter a very popular and, honestly, a very cheerful piece of pop culture. When we hear the words chimney sweep, most of us instantly picture soot-covered, dancing men singing on the rooftops of London, right? But the truth of this profession is actually one of the most harrowing chapters in human history. We're going to dive into the historical evidence to uncover the terrifying, everyday reality for the Victorian chimney sweep. We'll be looking at the economics, the architecture, and the incredibly lethal human cost hidden behind closed doors. Let's dive in. Think about the sheer scale of this historical contradiction for a second. It is staggering. We have this modern myth, the cheerful singers, the Mary Poppins characters, the tradition where seeing a sweep on your wedding day is actually considered a good luck charm. But the historical reality? It's drastically different. For centuries, the real chimney sweeps were not dancing adults. They were indentured orphans. Their reality wasn't musical numbers, it was suffocation, severe physical deformities, and absolute exploitation. To really understand this era, you have to look at the dual world of Victorian England. Imagine the scene. You've got a wealthy, comfortable family sitting in their parlor, kept perfectly warm by a blazing coal fire. But hidden just inches away, right inside the very walls of that home, was a dark, suffocating tomb. It's a perfect multi-scale view of history, really. The macro-level comfort of an entire civilization sustained entirely by the micro-level nightmare of the children trapped within its architecture. Section 1. The architecture of exploitation. So, if we trace the evolution of domestic heating, we can actually see how choices in fuel completely dictated human exploitation. Back in the 1st century, Romans mostly just used open hearthstones. By the 16th century, built-in fireplaces became widespread in British homes, which was great for keeping smoke out of the room. But notice the 17th century, the hearth tax. This is a massive turning point. And finally, by the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution caused this huge coal boom, filling the skies, and those exact same flues with incredibly thick, sticky soot. Let's look a little closer at that tax. The hearth tax was a 17th century levy based on the number of chimneys attached to a house. Naturally, people wanted to save money, right? So instead of building new chimneys for new fireplaces, homeowners built these incredibly complex, interconnected flues that all snaked into one single existing chimney stack. This simple tax avoidance strategy created a labyrinth of narrow, horizontal, and sharply angled passageways that adults could no longer fit into or even reach with early tools. Which brings us to a truly terrifying dimension, 9 by 9 inches. That is just 23 by 23 centimeters. Because of those complex flues, the spaces became agonizingly claustrophobic. It became painfully clear that only a child, and we're talking sometimes as young as 4 years old, could physically cram themselves into these tiny pitch-black shafts to scrape away that highly combustible coal soot. Section 2. Inside the pitch black. To understand the visceral reality of this labor, we really have to look at the ascent itself. These children usually had to strip down completely naked, because even a thin shirt could snag on the jagged bricks and trap them. Then, they'd squeeze into a hot, pitch-black 9 by 9 inch flue. And remember, sometimes the fires had just been put out, meaning the bricks were literally still scorching. They ascended using this caterpillar-like crawl, leveraging their elbows, backs, and knees to inch upward, scraping their skin completely raw against rough brick and hardened creosote. And when a new boy inevitably scraped his knees and elbows down to the bone, the master sweeps didn't exactly offer bandages. Actually, they hardened the skin by standing the weeping child close to a hot fire and violently rubbing strong brine, salt water, right into the open wounds with a brush. This agonizing process was repeated every single evening until thick, tough calluses formed. Human empathy was just entirely absent from the trade. The neglect continued well after the workday ended, too. Consider the term sleeping black. These boys rarely bathed, maybe 3 times a year, or just a quick freezing wash in the Serpentine River. They slept on cellar floors, huddled together for warmth, using the exact same filthy, carcinogenic sacks they used to collect soot during the day as their only blankets. And, this profound lack of hygiene, combined with constant exposure to toxic coal soot, created some truly unique occupational diseases. Beyond the stunted growth, the deformed spines, and chronic asthma, these boys suffered from chimney sweeps carcinoma. It was a fatal scrotal cancer caused by soot literally lodging in the skin. The medical realities these children faced were simply unimaginable. Section 3. Profit,
apathy, and entrenchment.
So, what kept this system going? Well, the economic incentives driving this cruelty were deeply, deeply entrenched. These climbing boys were largely orphans or from destitute families, essentially purchased from state run workhouses for as little as $20 in today's money. The master sweeps got free labor, making their real fortune by selling the collected soot back to farmers as a valuable fertilizer. Meanwhile, the upper classes completely normalized this system, treating impoverished children as an expendable resource just to maintain their pristine homes. Depending on your power and vulnerability in this society, soot meant entirely different things. For the master sweep, soot is a valuable cash crop, right? It's something to be hoarded in sacks and sold for a tidy profit. But from the climbing boy's perspective, soot is a suffocating, blinding, and carcinogenic shroud that dictates absolutely every waking and sleeping moment of his short life. Now, you might be wondering, didn't they have another way to clean chimneys? Well, they did. In 1828, an engineer named Joseph Glass invented a system of flexible cane rods and brushes that screwed together, allowing sweeps to clean complex flues from the total safety of the hearth. It worked perfectly. It proved human climbers were completely unnecessary. Yet, society actively resisted the technology. There's this one historical account that notes, if a chimney master soiled carpets and furniture with a new contraption, no tips were forthcoming. This provides such an incredible, chilling insight into human psychology. Middle-class housekeepers preferred climbing boys because they believed the children made less of a mess in their parlors than the mechanical brushes. They literally prioritized the cleanliness of their carpets over the lives of the children. Section 4. The Long Fight for Reform. A look at the legislation really maps out a century of willful ignorance. Society knew this was wrong, and they kept passing laws to ease their conscience. In 1788, they set a minimum age of 8, but it was widely ignored. In 1834, they banned kids under 14, poorly enforced. In 1864, they introduced fines. But it wasn't until 1875 that they finally ended the practice by requiring strict police licensing. Why did it take almost 100 years of failed laws? Because, tragically, it took a horrific event to finally force the government's hand. In February of 1875, a 12-year-old boy named George Brewster was sent by his master into the incredibly narrow chimneys of Fulbourn Hospital. He became lodged in the flue. Rescuers literally had to tear down a solid brick wall in a desperate attempt to save him, but he died shortly after being pulled out. His tragic death created such massive public outrage that Lord Shaftesbury finally got the leverage needed to demand strict police enforcement. George Brewster was the last climbing boy to die on the job. Section 5. Folklore and Cultural Memory. So we have to ask how this incredible trauma morphed into the cheerful tradition we know today. May Day, the 1st of May, was traditionally the only holiday granted to London climbing boys. To make a little extra money during the warmer, slower months, they'd dance in the streets, banging their brushes and shovels together to collect tips. Eventually, they started parading inside a massive, conical framework covered in foliage, known as the Jack and the Green. Over the decades, this desperate bid for survival money simply merged with ancient folklore about nature spirits.
It's really a testament to the power of cultural memory and our intense desire to romanticize the past. The brutal reality of abused, soot-choked children morphed over the decades into cheerful, sanitized folklore, like sweeps being good luck charms at weddings. Society slowly, intentionally forgot the suffering of the lower classes, opting to keep only the picturesque traditions.
But before the memory was completely sanitized, it was captured by writers. Charles Kingsley's 1862 novel, The Water Babies, alongside William Blake's poetry, served as absolutely vital tools for social justice. By writing compelling narratives about the invisible world inside the flues, these authors basically forced the Victorian public to actually confront the horrors they were permitting. They championed the sweeps and really helped turn the tide of public opinion. The crucial takeaway from this explainer isn't just about a bygone era. It's about entrenched interests and willful blindness. The Victorian upper classes knew the climbing boys were suffering, but they liked their clean carpets and cheap coal fires way more than they wanted to change the system. So, as we wrap up, we really must ask ourselves, when we look at our own entrenched energy systems and modern supply chains today, what invisible human costs are we ignoring just to keep the hearth fires burning? It's a civilizational pattern, and understanding the true history of the chimney sweep helps us see it with crystal clarity.